Welcome to the Inventory Professional Podcast, brought to you by InventoryBase, providers of industry-leading property inspection software, accredited training, and on-demand property reports. Join us as we discuss the latest news, legislation, and all things property, hosted by our very own inventory expert, Sean Hemming-Metcalf. With regular special guests, listen in to our open and honest discussions about the role of the inventory professional and how to navigate through this ever-changing, fast-paced industry.
Well, right, so we are now live. Right, hi everyone. We're just gone live a couple of minutes before our 1 o'clock event. We are just going to wait for the numbers to build up a little bit, and then we will get talking. Just to say, obviously, we're here to answer any questions or queries you might have. So please feel free to post questions as comments, whether you're watching us on YouTube or Facebook. Doesn't matter. Just post your comment on there. We can see them all on the dashboard that we're looking at. And obviously, we can share any of those comments on screen, and those comments and questions, and can try and address those for you. So do please send in any questions you might have. But otherwise, yeah, Sean and I are gonna be talking a little bit around inventories. We'll start off with the more technical element about what an inventory exactly is, what makes a good inventory, why it's wise to use an independent inventory clerk rather than to generate a document yourself. Key pieces that must be covered in there, yeah, we'll cover those bits and pieces, and then we'll talk around some sort of things that we've learned from the experiences we've had involving inventories over the years, and yeah, then we'll go from there. So see the numbers building up a little bit, which is nice. We're just going to give it probably another minute or two, and then we will get going.
Cool, sounds good to me.
Yeah. Does everyone have a nice weather this morning? I was slightly.
Do you know what? It's lovely out.
I know it didn't look that nice, and then sort of got all jeans and everything on and went outside and was like, no, this is far too warm for me.
To be fair, here in Bournemouth, Bournemouth is absolutely stunning. In fact, I just realised just before we went on the call that I had all my washing out for everybody to see in the background. So I quickly rushed out to get it back in again before anyone saw. But it's all dry. Half an hour, all done.
Done. Good. Okay. Cool. Well, look, we're sort of a minute in, so we'll get going. Hopefully, people will jump in and do some comments as we go along. So, hi everyone. Welcome to the latest piece by Agents Here to Help, where we're looking to really sort of inform and educate landlords and tenants in particular on this one about the importance of inventories when renting a property. I'm joined today by Sean, who from InventoryBase, who also is a very experienced inventory clerk. And so Sean is going to be sharing with us some gems of her knowledge, a little bit of backstory about how she got into being an inventory clerk, and yeah, we'll go through things. Like I said, hi Charlotte, thanks for joining us. Do you guys please comment to say hi? Do please post your questions. We are watching them. We'll share them if they are relevant. So Sean, thanks for joining me today.
Lovely, thanks. I'm really grateful for being here, and thank you for inviting me.
Oh, absolutely welcome. So, Sean, tell me a little bit, first of all, before we delve into, hi Carla, before we delve into the nitty-gritty of inventories itself, tell us a little bit about you, your background, what you do, how you got into your line of work.
So my background is completely different to what I do now. So for 21 years up until 2011, I was working in the prison service, and I worked my way up from for effectively a clerk, like a back office clerk, through to a governing governor. So basically, I worked in prisons for 21 years, and about 2011, there was an opportunity to take some voluntary redundancy, and I thought, well, what else can I do? What else do I enjoy doing? And I wanted to just literally pivot my career at that point.
So you made that very logical leap from working in the prison service to being an inventory clerk.
Not logical from the point of view of the actual, maybe the role, but the understanding behind it, because I dealt with a lot of litigation, a lot of things around about evidence gathering, protocols, understanding standards. I worked a lot with Her Majesty's Inspectorate and also the Crown Prosecution Service. So my understanding of evidence is quite keen. And one of the reasons I started this particular business, because I still run my own inventory company, is because basically I fell foul of a poor inventory. I fell foul of a not so great letting agent a good few years ago, and I thought, well, I could do this better.
Right, Sian? This was your experience as a landlord?
As a landlord, yes, yeah. So because of that experience, because basically I was left with a property that I really wasn't protected by the report, I was very much out of pocket, and I thought, well, this can be done better. Surely there's a better way of doing this. So when I left, I effectively started my own business and started working out, well, what does an inventory look like? And one of the first things I found was it differs, right across the board, different regions, different people, different providers. So what I wanted to do is try to help standardise the report. So the first thing I need to do is find out, well, what is an inventory report and what makes a good inventory report. And from my personal perspective and how I train clerks, etc., is about the detail. The fact that you've got to have a frame, you've got to have a methodology for capturing it, making sure you're capturing everything that I, as maybe a tenant, would see or the landlord would see.
Just to cut in there, for those I'm sure pretty much everyone watching has a good idea of exactly what an inventory is. But for those who aren't completely clear, so I think some people get mistaken that an inventory is literally just the contents of a property. But a good inventory, I think, as we both know, is a detailed record of the entire property, right? So you'll talk about everything from floor coverings and the walls and the curtains and the light fittings and the plug sockets and the fixtures and fittings, all the way through to your sofas, your table lamps, your etc., and it will talk about the state of the garden, the state of the front garden, the state of the windows, all this kind of stuff. So it's literally a top to bottom list of everything that makes up the property and its content and the condition of it. Yeah.
And also like the surrounding areas, and sometimes also the communal areas, especially if it's in blocks of flats that maybe the landlord has one or maybe two or more properties within that flat. There's still a bit of responsibility in the communal areas as well. So certainly from an inventory point of view, we're capturing everything that is basically like you said, the garden, the property edges, the garden, the front, the side, depending on the type of property it is, but also the communal areas as going in for flats, if it be on the communal level where you go into the property, or also surrounding the property, because we're also looking for health and safety hazards and issues and things like antisocial behaviour. So we're looking at all of that. So for us, it's about including everything that that we can see that the landlord effectively is responsible for. So they're responsible for the fabric of the property, for making sure it's safe, that it fulfills the criteria under fits with human habitation, and making, like you said, sure that all the contents are noted. Doors, windows, frames, ceilings, windows, and everything therein, especially around the furniture and appliances. Everything gets recorded, or at least it should.
Cool. And then So we've covered like sort of what technically an inventory is. I mean, what do you think are the details that makes the difference between a poor inventory and a really good quality inventory?
A lot of it is down to the description, not only describing the items, but also the condition as well. So if you say something's white painted, well, it doesn't really tell you very much. But if you say if it's like a door, it's like white painted wood, what accessories it's got, then if when it comes to checkout, those accessories are damaged or missing, it's very. So the more detail you have, the better it is, the better report it is, especially you're creating a document that realistically should be signposted to the adjudicator, and they won't go to that house. They won't see it as part of that adjudication process. During a deposit dispute, they will not see that property. So you effectively have got to give them all the tools to understand what that property is like, what it was like at beginning.
So in that example you gave, you should also be saying things like sort of freshly painted, or signs of light wear and tear, or light scuffing, or medium, heavy scuffing, etc., etc.
Yeah, but also showcasing that. Don't just be saying it, but showcase it. So I teach people to sign, reference, and signpost. So you're saying what it is, you're referencing, so you're signposting where it is, where it exists, and what it exists on, and then you're referencing it by pictures, and also, if depending on your kind of service, video as well. So that again, that deposit adjudicator can see exactly what you're saying, which is effectively subjective evidence, and then that's then made into objective evidence by what you're physically showing them through the pictures or through the video. So you're qualifying what it is you're saying. So
that's really important, isn't it, to have both the written record and a visual one, like you said, photos, maybe video, you know, depends on the service. One thing I've seen some inventories, you know, quite a lot of inventory clerks do, is they'll quite often, when they're taking photos of things, they will have something in that photo to give scale. So they might hold a ruler against it, or they might just hold, you know, a biro pen or a coin, just something so that, you know what you're looking at, you know what the size it is. Because I think, as we both know, right, you could have a scuff on a wall, you zoom really in, it could look like the whole wall's dark, you know, or you take it too far out, what could be quite a large scuff could on the photo look like
it could look completely different, couldn't it? Yeah, absolutely. Which is why I always say to people, signpost. So for me, I know some clerks will signpost like on walls, like wall 1, 2, 3, and 4.
Yeah.
I tend to do it more of a, if I'm walking into a room, there's a scuff on the wall to the left, so I'll say scuff to the wall, left or lower left as you enter, because you've got to remember is that report's got to be read by everybody, the tenant, the landlord, potentially the deposit adjudicator, and potentially a judge, depending on, you know, how far that report goes. So if you aim your report to the highest possible level, then everybody else is protected. And by signposting and referencing, you're telling people exactly where to look. So they'll walk into that room, they'll look to the left at the wall, they'll look down, there's the scuff. I tend to use fingers, you know, as an example of, you know, signposting, purely because I won't ever forget it. It's effectively consistent, and most finger looks like. So from that point of view,
don't vary that much, right? Even if you've got small hands or big hands, we're not talking. Yeah, I mean, that's great. Like you said, you've always got it with you. It's very easy to do.
Yeah, I mean, things like pens, etc., and some people use small rulers. That's fine. The only thing I ever say to people is just make sure you're consistently using the same or similar item all the way through, because you want consistency all the way through that report. Because if you use a different type, then you could skew the way the picture looks or the way it's interpreted. So, you know, keep that consistent.
Now, look, is it okay for a landlord to get or create an inventory and just have that and literally just use that at the end of a tenancy, just to refer back to that, or, you know?
If you talk to any of the the deposit schemes, what they say is they will accept evidence. That's effectively what they say. I will accept evidence that you put in front of me. However, the problem that some landlords have, and I can honestly say this because I've been a landlord, is the fact that we tend to look at properties a little bit differently as inventory clerks as to landlords. So certainly when I was a landlord, and I had this issue when I first started out as a landlord owner, my perspective on the property was more about the emotional side of it, i.e. that's my property, it's been left in a terrible condition, you know, and it's like, you know, I put heart and soul into that and I looked after it and it hasn't been looked after. Whereas as a clerk, I'm looking at, okay, there's been a change, what is it, where is it, to what extent does it exist? So my evidence is more fact-based, and I'm taking the emotion out of it, so I'm not missing anything. And I think for me, certainly that's where the biggest difference is that landlords can do their own reports absolutely fine, but you need the detail and you need to include everything, not what you think you're happy with or don't want to include. I mean, I've had that before where landlords said, don't include this, I don't want that shown. But if you're then going to rely on that at checkout, if something goes wrong and you don't have that information at the beginning, then
if it's not in the report, you're not covered.
Exactly. You can't be confused at the beginning.
Yeah, what's really important landlords understand, I think this often gets lost in the conversation, is that, you know, fundamentally we're talking about whether it's a tenant paying out of their pocket or whether this is something that's going to be deducted from their deposit. It's the tenant's money. Until a landlord or their managing agent can substantiate that claim, You know, gone are the days when landlords or letting agents could just go, oh, there's a cigarette burn in your carpet, we're keeping your whole deposit.
Yeah.
Thankfully, you know, those days are gone. And the onus is very much now on the landlords or the managing agents. You've got to substantiate your claim, right? I mean, you can try it without evidence. You can go to a tenant and say, oh, look, this wall's really badly scuffed, or this sofa's been damaged. I want 200 quid to sort it out. And of course, that tenant might just turn around and go, yeah, sure, I messed up. Here's 200 quid. But if the tenant doesn't readily accept that, you know, that's really where this all comes to play, right? Because
absolutely,
you know, first of all, they've got to have that conversation with the tenant about, well, no, here's the evidence to support that claim. If that doesn't reach, excuse me, if that doesn't reach an agreeable solution, then the likelihood is that will result in a dispute with one of the tenancy deposit regulation services, and that will get passed to an adjudicator. And obviously those adjudicators will very much look at evidence, right? They're not just going to take an email from a landlord saying, oh, this was nice, it's now not, and I want 200 quid. You need to rule to give it to me, right? That adjudicator is going to want to see black and white evidence that substantiates that landlord's claim.
Exactly, and evidence that can be backed up, that is substantiated by pictures, by video, that they're date and timed, it's very clear that that's exactly when they were captured, because you will get that argument about, oh, you know, are you sure it was done at that time? You know, it could have been done later, that could have been doctored, etc., etc. But certainly with apps at the moment, certainly with InventoryBase app, the date and time is embedded. It's at a point of capture, that's when that metadata is taken. So therefore, it's very clear that exactly on that date is when that issue was noted by the clerk. I mean, we used to use, certainly when I started out, you know, paper, you know, showing the date and the time, sorry, the dates on the front of the newspaper to qualify when your report was done. But obviously we've moved much further ahead since then with apps, and certainly with the InventoryBase app. But you're right, at the end of the day, the money is the tenant. It belongs to the tenant, and that's it. So we, as landlords, you know, you've got to, like you said, be able to evidence the fact that you've got a legitimate claim against that deposit. And if you can't do that, then of course you won't win it.
Now, to really make that watertight, right, Sian, it's really important that landlords or their inventory clerks involve the tenant in the creation of the document, right? So whether the tenant is there present and it's a digital document done there, or whether tenants are provided with a copy of that document to review. Like for us at Base, I'm pretty sure we give our tenants 28 days. So we will provide them, typically we'll get a check-in done with an inventory clerk. So we'll have a very basic schedule of condition when our tenants move in, which is literally just like a 2-page document saying, yeah, it's generally clean, meter readings, keys handover, and it will highlight anything major. Before that check-in process takes place, obviously our clerk's gone and they've taken all their notes and everything else, but our reports aren't ready at that moment the tenant moves in. They have to be generated. So we'll usually send that report to the tenant 2 or 3 days later. And we will then say to our tenants, right, you've got 28 days to review the document, notify us of any changes, notes, alterations you want to make to that. And yeah, basically you need to get those back to us within 28 days. If you don't if you don't notify us of anything within 28 days, then that is taken that you're accepting the document as accurate as received. And that is what we'll refer to at the end. So whether it's the document we provide because there's no notes, obviously if they do come back with notes, we'll save those. They might actually annotate it in the document. You know, it is really important to involve them so that that record's validated, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And especially nowadays, again, with apps and InventoryBase, you can the tenants have a field, they have their own column where they can make notes, they can upload photographs, because at the end of the day, clerks are in a property for a certain amount of time. Tenants have got 7, 14, 28 days in order to look at the property, maybe, you know, much more close scrutiny. And so, you know, there are things that will come up, and that's absolutely fine, because I do think tenants need to have the right to be able to comment. Sometimes, and 9 times out of 10 in my experience, and certainly from the reports I've seen, is tenants do pick up on things that have already been picked up, but maybe they just look at it in different fields. But the main thing is they've been given that opportunity, because again, you've got to be looking at the end part of the process. So if you do have to go to dispute, then the landlord can clearly show, I gave the tenant every opportunity to say that there was a problem or highlight the problem, and now, you know, at the end of the dispute, they're relying on something which, you know, all the way through the tenancy they haven't actually brought up, or they, you know, they were given the vehicle to do that and they haven't done that. So it helps the landlord gather that evidence automatically and give a shared history of that report, ready for the adjudicator. So, and that's again,
isn't it? Hope for the best, prepare for the worst.
Absolutely.
Make sure you've got everything there. If you don't need it, fantastic. But if you do need it and you don't have it, big trouble. And I think, you know, personally, I feel the value of values are inventories are massively undervalued in the process. I mean, when you think about it, I mean, from our experience, I would say the average inventory comes in probably somewhere around £150, something like that. And when you actually think the level of cover you get for that, I mean, when I think, you know, our average property, we tend to deal in a sort of middle market in London, which is sort of typically the equivalent of prime market pretty much anywhere else in the country. I think our average rent is somewhere around sort of £2,200. You know, I mean, tenants can cause a few £100s worth of damage. They can cause literally thousands of pounds worth of damage. And we're going to touch on this later. We're going to talk about some stories, you and I, that we've had over the days. But yeah, I do think they're an insanely good value. We've got a good question from Deb here. I'm just going to bring this up. So, Deb, thanks for joining in. Do you need an inventory for an unfurnished property? Really good question.
Yes, you know, in a very short way of saying it, but yes, absolutely, because it doesn't matter whether it's furnished or unfurnished. The property still can be damaged, still can be not looked after. It can still be altered. Sometimes tenants will alter a property, mostly painting, you know, decorating, maybe changing some tiles. I've seen one tenant actually change a whole bathroom suite. It actually looked really good, but they didn't get permission. But if you didn't have an inventory, you know that it's changed. Because at the end of the day, you're just relying on someone's memory. Well, you can't give that memory to an adjudicator, but you can give them a report to show that things have changed. Now, they might be for the better, and we've had, and I often see reports where the property's actually been given back in better order than what they got it in the first place, cleaner, tidier, been repainted, no scuff marks, etc. But equally, it can go the opposite way, and I've seen properties absolutely trashed, so badly damaged. One of them I came across, it was so bad. I think it cost the landlord something up to about £20,000 in order to rectify it. It was a big property, but it was a lot of damage, a lot of issues. But because they had that detailed inventory, it was so evident, so clear of what had occurred, i.e. from when the tenancy started, when the report was done to when the checkout was done. It was basically, there wasn't even an argument to be had, because there was just no way that a tenant could actually say, well, it wasn't me. It just couldn't happen. So from that point of view, you're taking out a lot of emotion from this particular process, and also the argument, because if you've got very clear factual evidence, and that's done by a third party, so I don't have a vested interest in your property, I just have an interest in the property, i.e. doing it properly, providing a good report. Therefore, the adjudicator is more likely to rely on that, because they're looking at balance of evidence. They're looking at balance of probability. You know, was that property like that? Well, yes, because there's a report. Was it like this at the end of the tenancy? Yes, because there's a report.
Yeah, so I think that, so Deb, just in summary to your question, yes, you do need inventory for an unfurnished property. As we touched on earlier, it's about, you know, an inventory is about protecting the fabric of the building, not just the content. So yes, an inventory will also protect furnishings, but, you know, your floorings, your wall coverings, your fixtures and fittings, as Sian said, those could be altered for the worse or for the better.
I've seen, you know, properties where doors are missing, kitchens are missing, bathrooms are missing. I've actually saw one myself personally where the tenants has actually dug through the wall, tried to pull out the copper piping. Now, that's one of the ones I've seen, but it happens. And the thing is, because we had that original report, and the reports that we do, my company does, and I also teach clerks to do, is always have an overview of the room. Some people have 2 pictures, sometimes 4. But by having that, you're giving context to the adjudicator, or potentially, like I said, the judge, so that they can clearly see this is the condition of the room. And then you go into the granular detail, the fixtures, fittings, skirting, etc. But when it comes to checkout and you do that exact same picture again, and you can really see the differences and the changes, again, you couldn't do that if you just cast it to memory.
I think an important part of it as well is I think what some landlords, less so managing agents, I think pretty much all managing agents know they've just got to have these in place to do their job and deliver the service to their landlords. But I think one of the mistakes private landlords make is they'll look at who they're putting in the property and they'll go, they'll be fine. You know, they're nice, or they're a family.
My friend, my family, I know them for years.
You know, they've got a really good job, or, you know, whatever it is. And I think the important thing to learn is, you know, from my experience, you know, I've been a letting agent now for 20 years. There is no rhyme or reason. You know, I've seen students who are in their first home return a property like it was a palace. And I've had people with high six-figure salaries return their place like an absolute sty, and vice versa.
Yeah, me too.
For me, a story that really underpins sort of the value of inventories, and we chatted about this the other day, is, you know, we've actually, the biggest landlord we actually have, he's been a landlord for over 30 years, big portfolio landlord, really professional landlord as well, though, builds a lot of his own property, but it is all done way above the standard spec. You know, he does fantastic maintenance. He usually repaints his properties for every single tenant he puts in there, way above and beyond what most landlords would do. Now, he has a house down the road from us in Spitalfields that we've looked after for probably about 15 years now. And he came to us, this was probably about 5-6 years ago. I've not looked at the record. But basically, he has a business partner. His business partner had approached him and was like, oh, look, my son is going to be going to the arts college up the road. I'd like my son to live there with 3 of the mates he's doing the college with, you know. So he came to us and was like, look, guys, don't need you to find tenants for me this time. We're just going to pop these guys in it. And so I started having a chat with him, and I was like, oh, okay, that's cool. I was like, you know, what are you doing about a tenancy agreement? Do you want us to do a tenancy agreement? No, we're not going to worry about a tenancy agreement, which was initially worrying. And then it was like, okay, what are you doing about a deposit? Oh, we're not going to take a deposit, you know, because it's family and friends. And then, oh, what about an inventory? You know, we're not doing a tenancy agreement. We're not going to do an inventory. And, you know, thank God, my conversation with the landlord then was, look, no money, we're not going to charge you anything, but please let us do a tenancy agreement for you free of charge. We'll sort that out for you. We'll get everyone checked and on there. Please take a deposit. I mean, at the time, this was before the tenant fee ban, we were still taking 6-week deposits, but we were like, look, at least take a month's rent. And it was, you know, it's a serious property. It was, I think, about $4,500 a month in rent. So you're looking at £4,500 deposit. And in my mind, I'm thinking, that's fine. Our average deduction, I mean, if we take cleaning out of it, I think our average deduction at our agency is something like 150 quid a tenancy. So it's nothing. You know, we were like, look, just safeguard yourself. Yes, it's your partner's son, but, you know, there's 3 other people. You don't know who they are. Yes, they're all from wealthy backgrounds, but experience is often.
That doesn't mean anything. It does not mean anything. It means clean.
Young as well, and that's quite often actually more of a red flag than anything else. And thank God we did, because, you know, they all moved in there, you know, they signed and we got the inventory done and all that sort of stuff, and they moved in. And that landlord called me 3 months later, and you know, this is not an emotional guy, but he called me like audibly, nearly in tears, saying, you know, I've just been to the house and I don't know what to do. You know, and he started telling me, and I said, look, not a problem, just leave it to me. I was like, this is really difficult because it's your business partner and their son, and, you know, it's fine. I'll talk to the tenants, I'll go down. And it was horrendous. You know, these guys had been lying in bed. I mean, all of our properties are strictly no smoking. These guys have been lying in bed, smoking cigarettes in bed. And then when they'd finished smoking their cigarette, they leant out of bed and they were stubbing the cigarette out on the brand new carpets that were put in just before we moved in. There were literally ashtrays on windowsills everywhere, just overflowing. Things spilt, just left, nothing wiped up. They were all art students, so they were doing sort of art projects at home. 2 of the rooms in the property had these beautiful parquet wood floors that had all been sanded and lacquered just before these guys moved in. These guys had been doing spray paint artwork on the floor. They hadn't put any paper, anything down. And, you know, it turned out, you know, I think everyone's getting the point by now. But it turned out that we got them out within another 3 months, got them to surrender the tenancy and go somewhere else. In that 6 months in the property, they'd caused £15,000 worth of damage. And then the interesting thing was, we obviously then turned around to the tenants and said, look, here are the works that are having to be done to rectify. I mean, basically, the whole house was repainted before they moved in. It had to be repainted again. Half the carpets had to be replaced because they had cigarette burns in. I mean, all sorts of stuff. They literally, in the 6 months they were there, they never put a single bag of rubbish out on the street. They just stockpiled it on their patio. So we had an 8-foot-high stack of black rotting bin bags. I mean, just
did that at home.
talking about it now. But why the documentation worked was, when we first went to the tenants, or rather their parents, you know, we ultimately went to the parents and copied the tenants in because it was the parents paying for everything. And we were like, look, here's the works bill. Here's the inventory. There's £15,000 worth of damage. So we'll take the 4.5 grand deposit off. That leaves, you know, another 11 grand or whatever it was. And so, you know, it was like 2.5 grand per person that they needed to pay. And their first response was, come and get us. You know, one was Spanish, I think one was German, I think one was Swiss, and all the parents lived abroad. And their instant response was,
what can you do about it?
What are you going to do about it? We're not paying. And we turned around and said, well, we've got a tenancy agreement and we've got the inventory. So it's very simple. Your kids have just started a 3-year degree course and will be going, you know, from what I understand, all of them are looking to secure employment in the UK immediately after that. So it's very simple. You don't pay, we'll raise it, we'll flag it with the TDS for dispute, and then we'll go to court. If we don't get the ruling we want, we were actually talking about going direct to court. And all three parents who were very wealthy all sort of went to their family solicitors with the documents and evidence we'd sent them. And within 24 hours, all 3 parents had sent me an email saying, please give me your bank details of where we need to send the money.
And there you go.
Yeah, that was, you know, that was a perfect example for us of, you know, a tenancy where the landlord really felt they didn't need any protection. They didn't even want a tenancy agreement, let alone anything else in place. I mean, could you imagine if we didn't have that? I mean, absolute disaster. They would have walked away and the landlords would have been left with that £15,000 bill. Absolutely. Exactly. So, you know, it just goes to show, you know, it's not about whether you think or believe that tenant is going to do something, because the bottom line is, by the time it's happened, right, it's too late.
Exactly. And when you think about it, what we're doing is we're doing risk mitigation. We're evaluating the potential risks and making sure that we're minimising any potential that we're going to get to that point, you know, as you know, when it comes to the end of the tenancy. I mean, it might be a good time to show a couple of the slides if you don't mind.
Yeah. Let's share that.
We go to that first one. So these kind of figures of what everybody probably is already aware of, that there's 4.7 million households in the private sector. We were talking about average deposits. The average is 1,299. That was marked in 2019, might be slightly different now. And there's 1.9 billion estimated deposits held, and this is TDS figures from last year. So you think that's 1.9 billion pounds worth of tenants' money in these various schemes held against the property that potentially could indemnify the landlord should anything happen, but without the evidence, they're not going to get anywhere near. And it's interesting, and I didn't realise this, that 67% of disputes are actually raised by the tenants. So again, if you haven't got that inventory and the tenant's basically saying, I didn't cause that, I didn't do that, you prove it, there's no way that the landlord's actually going to, again, get anywhere near that deposit legitimately, because they said they don't have that evidence. And as I think you pointed out earlier on, the main causes seem to be around damage and redecoration. And again, from an inventory clerk point of view, we need to showcase that property. So should that end up in dispute, that adjudicator can see exactly what that property looked like, what it included, what damage has been done, to what extent. I mean, one of the examples that I have is around switches and sockets, and I'm always banging on about these, but they're a really good example that if you don't capture that information, say you're a landlord, you're doing your own property, and I've seen it before, we've had a one-page report that says everything's been cleaned, everything's been newly painted, everything's been carpeted, that's it. And the property comes back and the switches and sockets have been changed. They've been changed from white plastic to chrome or vice versa. But the original report doesn't have any detail on that because the landlord didn't say that was of use. That one, they can't actually showcase the fact that these have changed. They also don't know who changed it, whether there's any permission given, also whether then it's now safe. And then the cost of having to put all those back and made safe is quite expensive. And now you've got EICR coming in as of the 1st of July, where all fixed wiring has to be certificated and made safe to the current, I think it's 18th edition standards. Again, if you haven't got reports kind of like detailing that kind of information within the property, and you do have an issue along those lines, how are you going to prove that? Yeah. So it's very clear that reports are very much needed, and I think they do need to be compiled by independent inventory clerks, because as I've shown, I think if you show the other slide for that I've got there, Kristjan.
Yeah. Hop across back over to that. Yeah. Next slide.
Yeah, obviously it's about the evidence, and with the evidence, with the report, then it's a balanced judgment. The adjudicator or the judge can make a balanced judgment based on what you are putting in front of them, and by showing and evidencing the change from inventory to checkout, the adjudicator has then got the ability to make a balanced judgment, a fair judgment on both sides, not just for the tenant and for the landlord, but for equally both of those people. So that, if monies need to be deducted, they can be, but equally, if the tenant's given the property back in in a much better order, we can showcase that. And a good inventory report will say that if a property's been given back in better order, it will say that. It won't just gloss over it. The report will say in cleaner condition, or repainted to a high standard, or an item maybe that was damaged initially when they took over the tenancy is now fixed or replaced. And certainly if a tenant replaces, I don't know, a carpet or flooring or a bit of furniture, first thing we ask them is, did you have permission? Yes, I did. Okay, have you got anything to back that up? Yeah, I've got emails. Great, lovely. All part and parcel of the evidence. And if you go to the next slide.
Yeah, let's hop across. Bear with me one sec. Here we go.
One of the things about inventory clerks is that we can take out the emotion side, so that we look at the properties very objectively. We are impartial because we've got no vested interest in that property. For us, it's just something, a property, a flat, an area that we've got to record accurately into our best of our ability. Clerks are professional. They're doing quite a hard job. It's not an easy job, and I would argue anybody to say that it is, because there are days when you are literally wiping your feet on the way out as opposed to on the way in. I've personally caught fleas from a job, and I was not happy about it, and I think it was the first time one of my estate agents ever even heard me swear. I was not happy because it affected my car as well. We were professional. We got the job done. We sorted it out. We made sure the agent was aware so they could sort it out, so no one else walked into what we just walked at. But equally, we're diligent. And this is not just about recording the fabric of the property in the conditions, but we're also looking at smoke and carbon monoxide alarms, making sure that the right alarms are in the right place. Often we're finding heat sensors use as smoke alarms, and that's not what they're for. The fact that we record certificates, Legionella risk assessments, as of the 1st of July, the EICR, EPCs, the keys, whether there's keys in the windows or not. So we're very diligent about that. And I would argue that certainly, and I can say this as a landlord, when I first started out, I wouldn't have gone to that kind of detail because I would not have thought about it, whereas inventory clerks think about it. And the other thing, if we go to the next slide, is the fact that because we are impartial, we often get involved in a lot of conversations, certainly at checkout, between the agent and the landlord, especially things aren't going quite right. And I've had a few of those myself, where, tempers get a bit heated, etc. And the amount of times clerks kind of step in, calm the situation down, effectively provide a more professional kind of like balance to the conversation, so that people are thinking more clearly, because we're there, we can help, we understand the industry, and we can offer advice. And a lot of agents don't realise how much information clerks actually have. The fact that we really do pay attention to the industry, we understand what's going on, we know that we've got URPNs coming in on the 1st of July, that we've got ICR coming in from the 30th of June at midnight coming in, and this morning I'd attended the ALA webinar about EICRs. So there's a wealth of knowledge that inventory clerks can bring, and I know, and from personal experience, that we often are relied on by agents for that understanding experience. And I certainly got that during the tenant feedback, where I was advising clients on what was included, what was not, what they could, what they couldn't do, etc. So they're an invaluable resource, and they're a resource you can bring in and use when you need them. Have them ready for you for when the reports are needed to be done at inventory and checkout. So they're a vital service, and I think you said quite rightly earlier on, they're not really well known or kind of like revered for the kind of service and the professionalism they actually bring. They're just not really thought about in that kind of context, and yet they do bring so much.
I think that's the plague of lettings, though. I think, isn't it? I think it's the same with gas engineers. It's the same with letting agents and property managers. Yeah. I think until a landlord has something go wrong, it's very easy to be like, I can do this.
It'll be fine. It'll be fine. It's a normal thing.
It'll be fine. And it's when something goes really wrong, that's when landlords suddenly go, oh, actually, I should have paid for a letting agent, because they would have advised me to do this, or they would have been liable for the fact this wasn't in place for when the tenant moved in. Or, like you say, you don't have a professional inventory. I remember we had a handful of landlords when we started who would sort of do their own inventories, and they were on average, I would say, probably 5, 6, 7 pages long. I mean, I think our average inventory at the moment is probably more like 40 pages.
Well, yeah, exactly. And it's not necessarily how many pages, it's what it includes. But I mean, definitely
on that.
I get your point totally. But it is about that detail. I mean, I recently did a report on a property, and the landlord gave me their version, which was about, I think it was about 20 pages and about 36 photographs.
Yeah.
I gave them back a report, 241 pages and 1,000 photographs.
Whoa.
Because that's what I found. Not because I wanted to be particularly picky or make a point. That's what I could see. And if I can see it, the tenant can see it, and the adjudicator needs to see it if we get to that point. And that's
touchstone. If it's not in the report, you're not covered. That's the bottom line.
Exactly. And
it's a big thing. If it's not in there, you've got no proof of record. I mean, there are sometimes workarounds. Like if you've had a brand new kitchen put in, you can obviously provide evidence that has been put in. That has been put in, and you can say, look, here's the invoice literally a week before the tenants moved in for a brand new 20 grand. There are workarounds, but it's not common. It's not common that you're going to have that. It's not common that everything in your property is going to be brand new, and that you're going to have sort of substantiated evidence.
Which is why I always say to agents, certainly make sure that you've got the manual folders in the property, so it shows you, how tenants can actually use the appliances. Because if they don't use them properly and you didn't give them a manual, that's an argument. That's a potential loophole. Certificates, again, same thing. If you haven't given to them, then they could be used, and so you might not get your section 21, not be able to start that process. Certainly from a point of view of
you touched on was really important. Legally you have to have that tested on the day they move in, right? So I know our inventory clerks, that's a very key function they do for us. They do all of that so that A, we know our tenants are safe, but obviously also B, so our landlords are compliant. And we've got a record of it. It's not just a landlord saying, I tested it.
Yeah, it is absolutely fine. And the thing is that those should be tested at checkout as well. So that then, as the managing agent or the landlord, have got ample time to rectify any issues and make sure that everything is up to standard. So they should be checked at inventory and checkout.
Great. All right, Sean. Well, I think we've done a pretty detailed top to tail there. So, Sean, just quickly, just to round things up, can you just tell us a little bit about InventoryBase? Because obviously InventoryBase isn't per se an individual inventory provider, is it? It's a sort of platform for inventory clerks. So
That's right.
A little bit about why would a landlord want to go to InventoryBase, or why would another inventory company want to join InventoryBase?
Right, so InventoryBase is, like you said, is the software provider. They provide the platform, the app, in order to be able to capture the information at the property. One of the really good key benefits, and one of the reasons I joined InventoryBase, because I still run my own company. I work with InventoryBase on the academy side of things, but I actually also am out there doing reports. So I was out yesterday and I'm going to be out tomorrow doing them. So I'm hands-on, so I know the industry. And one of the reasons I went to InventoryBase, I needed an app that was scalable, that did what I needed to do in the field, in real time, efficiently, quickly. So I'm in and out of the property as quickly as I can, but we're capturing all the detail that I need. So they provide with the software, with the app. It's easy to use. It's easy to manage.
Clerk that wants a good bit of kit that's built by people who really get the inventory process, that's going to make your life easier. If you're not already on them, go and check them out. Is InventoryBase something landlords can use, Sean, as well?
Yeah. I mean, anybody can have an account. It's entirely up to them. You know, we have landlords, agents, letting agents across the board, from corporate down to small to online as well. So it can be right across the board, really. If you need an inventory done, if you're doing in-house, doing it yourself, outsourcing, you've got to
find clerks through InventoryBase.
I'm sorry, say that again.
Can landlords find inventory clerks through InventoryBase as well?
Yeah, I was literally about to touch on that. So we've got a new initiative called work streams, and part of work streams means that it's bringing both the buyer, so that would be the landlord, could be the agent, online agent, and the supplier together online on the platform within IB, InventoryBase, so that it gives a really good platform to be able to talk to each other, to be able to put work on and offer work out and bid for that work in a very safe, secure way. And we've got protocols in place, we've got guidance, and one of the things I do from an InventoryBase Academy point of view is we're offering support constantly right the way through the process, because one of the things that some apps don't tend to do is they give you the app, but then help you with the technical, but it's the actual job itself that a lot of people need help with. So that's why we have Academy. So we've trained over 500 clerks in the last year or so, and we do that by supporting them right the way through that, the reporting process, understanding the industry, understanding legislation, and basically helping clerks, up their standard, get to the quality and level that everybody, certainly from a landlord, from an agent point of view, want to get. So InventoryBase provides not just that, the app,
but an all-in-one inventory service. Yeah,
absolutely. And it's constantly evolving as well. We're constantly looking at what can be done better, because you as an agent want certain things from the platform, clerks want something else, landlords, tenants as well, from functionality point of view, and clerks want something that they can use, rely on, and obviously get support with.
Cool. So there we go. If you're an inventory clerk, if you're needing to sort of slightly reinvent your business, or maybe you already use the reporting software and you're not 100% blown away with it. I know Sean used a reporting thing before coming to InventoryBase and got very frustrated with a few because they just weren't right, didn't work the way inventory clerks need them to work. So yeah, if you're an inventory clerk, if you're a landlord looking for an inventory, either to do an inventory yourself, you could get it, or using the workflows thing, you can find yourself a clerk to do some work for you. Hopefully we've imparted some really helpful advice to you guys today. Only had a handful of questions today, but this video is going to be shared. Most people probably watch this as a playback. Do please still engage with the post. Do please comment, email us questions if there are things we haven't covered. If we get enough questions, we might do a second round, but otherwise Sean and I will keep an eye on these posts, and we'll try and respond as quickly as we can to any questions we have. But that's it for today, guys. That is our latest Agents Here to Help, all about why inventories are an essential part of letting out a property. Sean, thank you so much for your time today and for your knowledge. All right, you have a good rest of your week. And thanks, everyone. Enjoy the rest of your week. Have a good one. Take care.
Bye.
Bye.
Thanks for joining us this week on the Inventory Professional Podcast. If you've enjoyed the show, subscribe to our podcast now and share the love. This podcast was brought to you by InventoryBase, providers of industry-leading property inspection software, accredited training, and on-demand property reports.